Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Endless Night, the Hart series, Book 2 by R.M. Gilmore, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Prologue. Never did I think I would ever willingly get on a plane and travel across the country in order to spend 3 nights surrounded by vampires. Things changed. Or better yet, Tatum Price was relentless. After the gruesome staking and beheading of 2 would-be vampires, my outlook on life changed. My crunchy exterior had grown a few more layers. I'd been told it wasn't a good change. Mike and I were on regular speaking terms. He had his hands full with Reggie and her missing head, leaving little time to harass me. Another headless and staked body turned up in Vegas about a month ago. Mike was concerned there was another serial killer on the loose. I tried not to care. I had other things to do. I decided, out of respect for the lives lost, I would not write the book I had originally set out to write. Instead, I'd chosen to compose a fiction novel based on the individuals I met through my journey. Sanguinarians, lifestyle vampires as I had learned they preferred to be called. Tatum decided it would be helpful to drag me to the Endless Night Mask in New Orleans for research. In reality, her now full-time beau had an extra VIP ticket. She and I had made up. I gave in and stopped being mad, and she never mentioned it again. She seemed happy. I, on the other hand, wished she'd realized he was an idiot. But until then, I might as well reap the benefits of my best friend dating the Primus of California. Whatever the fuck that meant. Of course, the Primus wouldn't leave the nest without his puppy, Cyrus. I hadn't spent much time with Cyrus since I accidentally shot him while trying to kill a boy who thought he was a vampire. Cyrus healed from his gunshot wound fairly quickly. I sent balloons to the hospital. Endless Night Mask to Sang, a 3-day event featuring loads of fun for vampires everywhere. After my last go-round with so-called vampires, I was appropriately apprehensive. As long as no one ended up headless or drained of blood, I'd be fine. Oh shit, who was I kidding? The likelihood of a corpse popping up at a function revolving around vampires was high. Dead bodies make for a killer book. Chapter 1. It was always awkward being in Mike's house, standing in his living room, looking at pictures of us hanging on every wall, standing framed on every surface. It was weird to think he walked around in that house every day with my face staring at him from all angles. I always wondered why he never took them down. I'd hung most of them there when we moved in, and I left them right there where they hung the day I walked out. Apparently, so had he. You never know, Mike said from the bathroom. I looked in the direction of his voice to see a sliver of light around the door jamb. He hadn't bothered closing the door. It felt all too natural talking to him through a crack in the bathroom door, like nothing had ever changed. I leaned against the edge of the couch just down the hall from the bathroom and listened to the water running in the shower. Never know what? I asked, loud enough he could hear me over the running water. Small wafts of steam puffed out from the opening in the door, and with it the smell of his soap. I hadn't had the pleasure of that smell in a long time. I closed my eyes and breathed in deep. The truth, he replied just after he turned the water off. I could hear him moving around the small room, clanking his toothbrush in the cup, opening and closing the medicine cabinet, all the little mundane tasks we took for granted every day. Those little sounds of daily life pulled me back into a time I thought I'd almost forgotten. A time I was in love. A time I was safe and happy. A time I could never get back. And you do? Does anyone ever really know what's real? I questioned, looking at a picture of the 2 of us that hung on the wall only inches from my head. We looked so happy, wide smiling faces and bright eyes. Not usually, no, but you could if you wanted to. His voice came clearer than it had before. I glanced away from our shining faces to see Mike had emerged from the bathroom, shower wet and towel clad. He never met my eyes when he turned from the bathroom and walked away from me. The deep indent of that trailed from between his shoulder blades to the small of his back shifted and moved with every step. I hadn't forgotten what his body looked like. I just hadn't thought about it in a while. An unconscious smirk and tweak of my brow came with the memory of every moment I'd laid eyes on the better half of that man. Mike cleared the space between the bathroom and his bedroom door, wearing only a small, stark white towel around his waist. He seemed to not care that I was in perfect eyeshot of his half-naked body. Part of me that was content with the situation. Then there was a part of me, the logical part, which said there was no way in hell it was ever going to happen. I happily ignored that part and enjoyed the view. A few steps before he reached the privacy of his room, I pulled the towel from around his waist and brought it up to dry his wet hair. In that tiny second, I caught a glimpse of the backside I'd been missing for damn near 2 years. 2 dimples sat just above his nicely rounded cheeks and just below the curve of his back. My throat made a small noise before I caught it and moved on. The sight of something so long missed can wreak havoc on your psyche, and that was the last damn thing I needed. "What is it that you want?" I asked. I wasn't sure where he was going with the conversation, and seeing all that he had to offer, well, not all, but a lot, made me forget why I was standing in his living room in the first place. "The same thing you do." He came out of his room and walked down the hall toward me, his wet hair messy from the towel. He'd put on pants. Just pants. Mike stopped a few feet from me. I could still smell his soap. I tried hard not to look at the expanse of his chest and shoulders. He wasn't a chiseled masterpiece, not even close, but he had the look of someone who could scoop you up in his arms and carry you to safety. Not that he'd ever tried to pick up my fat ass. I tried to look at him straight in the face as I had always been able to do, but all I could think about were those 2 little divots just above his ass. My eyes jerked away to move down his body and caught an eyeful of the pale line of hair that led from the top of his jeans to his belly button. Holy shit. My breath caught in my throat, but I managed to squeak out, "What is it you think I want?" I decided looking at his face was probably the best idea. He smiled and stepped closer. I liked his smile. It made his eyes crinkle on the sides. Standing that close to Mike felt as natural as putting my shoes on, but I knew it wasn't right. I knew there was no way it was a good thing. He was acting like nothing had changed, like we were still us. "What's wrong, babe?" His brows pulled together in the center, looking down at me from his 6-foot-whatever stature. I just shook my head. I had no idea what to say. He'd never put me in that position before. Not in a long time had he been so naked. I thought for a long time it was completely over, that I was done with it, with us. I'd come to terms with it and moved on. My tenacity was the only reason we were able to stay as some kind of friends. An expression passed over his face I hadn't seen in a long time. His eyes saw straight into me and dug around inside, like he was planning every moment with me from then on out, like he'd never leave me. He'd die for me. The muscles in his chest flexed, and his hand came up to wrap around the base of my neck. My heart literally stopped beating. I watched his face, looking for some kind of motive, waiting for the truth to rear its ugly head. "When you run, I'm here," he promised, as if it wasn't a seriously weird thing to say. "Believe in nothing you can't reach out and touch." Out of sheer compulsion, I reached out and touched his chest. He was warm and solid. "I love you, Dylan Hart." His mouth said those words without hesitation, without an ounce of regret. He crooked his head and leaned down toward me. The smell of soap so strong I thought I'd climbed inside of him. Drops of water fell from his wet hair onto my face and trickled down my cheek like tears. Maybe they were. I didn't care. I waited, ready for him to kiss me, wanting to remember so terribly what those kisses felt like and waiting for him to remind me. The heat from his breath tickled my lips. With heavy breaths, my heart pounded in my chest. I lifted myself up onto my tiptoes, forcing my lips to meet his. Bam, bam, bam! My body lurched and jerked and tumbled from the couch to the floor. "You've got to be fucking kidding me!" I yelled loud enough for the neighbors to hear. I laid there for a moment on my plush carpet, trying to get a grip on reality. After a few deep breaths, truth flooded into my head, and I knew where I was. I was at home, lying on my living room floor, desperately wishing the last 15 minutes of my life had been reality. The twinge of impure thoughts hit my stomach as I recalled the image of Mike and I knew it was wrong. My psyche had taken me on a journey into the past, and it was fun while it lasted. But that shit was long gone, and it was never coming back. Not if I had anything to do with it anyway. Yeah, right. Okay. My bags had been packed, and I'd been waiting or sleeping on the couch for 3 hours when the cock-block du jour knocked on the door. It took me away from potentially the first piece of ass I'd gotten in over a year. Subconscious or not, it was still more than I'd had in a while. If left unchecked, sexual frustration apparently ran rampant in your dreams, too. I climbed up from the floor, wiped the residual drool from my cheek, and stomped toward the door. Fuck, Tatum, took you long enough, I said in a huff as I flung open the front door. I'm sorry, I just couldn't decide on what to wear. I stood in shock in the open doorway. My eyes locked onto the beautiful white smile that was plastered on the man standing on my porch. Looks like you've had some trouble finding a hairbrush this morning, he remarked, smoothing the side of my hair down and back into my ponytail while I stood there with my mouth agape. Cyrus, what are you doing here? I grilled, flabbergasted. His perfect form nearly filled the doorway. It had been almost 5 months since I'd laid eyes on him. I would swear he'd gotten prettier in that time. It didn't help I'd been knee-deep in butt dimples just a few minutes before opening the door to this beautiful yet entirely unwanted surprise. Our lovely Tatum has taken too long to ready herself, so I have been asked to escort you to the airport. Brows pulled together, I questioned his existence with my glare. Is that a problem for you? He asked seriously, voice seeming almost hurt. His smile faded and a look of sadness moved across his perfect golden brown face. Rhetorically, I asked, do I have a choice? And turned to move into the living room and retrieve my canvas messenger bag plus one large rolling suitcase. You could drive yourself, he spoke through an obvious snicker from his place in the doorway. I let out a scoff that nearly shot a bit of snot from my nose. Luckily, my back was turned, so wiping it away proved to be stealthy. Cyrus stayed in the doorway, watching my every move. I was annoyed that Tatum hadn't come to get me. She was the only reason I was getting on that torpedo of death headed to the Big Easy to rub elbows with a horde of blood-sucking fiends. She promised we'd hang together and have a blast. She told me how bored she'd be if she was stuck alone with Malcolm at his head honcho vampire meetings and begged me to come with her to keep her company. Granted, the idea of snooping and getting an inside look at the world of vampires, no matter how fictitious they truly were, called to my inner curious cat. 4 months of working on my fiction novel, and I had nothing that wasn't already done to death. I was mere weeks away from becoming a dull boy. I needed something raw, something fresh, and a trip to New Orleans to hobnob with the underground vampire elite was just what the voodoo doctor ordered. Tatum and I had planned to meet at Malcolm and Cyrus at the airport an hour before Cyrus knocked on my door. That left me to make the trip to LAX alone, riding bitch in Cyrus' white SUV. I was not happy about the new arrangement. It wasn't that I hated him, because I didn't. In fact, I actually really liked him. That was the problem. It was too hard to focus when I was near Cyrus. Not to mention, half the time he was either driving me insane or causing me to question his motives. I'd just as soon have left him to be pretty somewhere else, somewhere other than in my living room. Either he needed to be less attractive, or I needed to get over my self-conscious bullshit. Maybe I could maul his pretty face a bit, bring him down a peg. I'll be just a minute, I called from the bedroom. It was a shock to the reproductive system seeing Cyrus only minutes after having a dreamy close encounter with Mike. Cyrus was pretty, but he would never be Mike. Cyrus waited patiently as I fixed my bed head and put my shoes on. I grabbed my house keys from the normal spot on my nightstand and ran my fingertips over the cold metal of my new best friend that sat beside them. The one and only thing that had allowed me to get a good night's sleep in these most recent months. After offing those two vampy boys in a basement full of blood, I'd become a bit hardened to society. Sleep was a fickle bitch when your mental images were a slideshow of blood, makeshift stakes, and decapitation. My gun let my oft-kilter brain pretend it was safe long enough to catch some Z's. Unfortunately, I couldn't take a gun through the airport. Probably a good thing for Cyrus, though. I snatched my phone from the charger on the wall, rolled up the cord, and grabbed a thick book just in case. Even if I didn't get time to read it, at least I could whack someone pretty good with the hefty hardback. Maybe it'd be Cyrus. I smiled to myself at the thought. Getting Twitter-pated over a stupid boy made me want to throat punch myself, let alone two stupid boys at once. Although, in the long run, Cyrus was the less complicated of the two. Surprisingly. "I'm ready," I said as I walked through the living room, bags in hand. I tried my damnedest not to meet his dark green eyes. The lustful hold he had on me had faded since the shooting incident. Apparently putting a bullet through someone you were fighting to despise helped the cause. Or it could have been the 5 months we'd spent not speaking. I still wanted to strip him down and screw him 6 ways to Sunday, but the unadulterated need to do as he wished had all but disappeared. Not looking into his perfect face was just a precaution, especially considering my Mike dream had left me all kinds of lusty. Since I was almost 100% sure Cyrus wasn't a cold-blooded killer, I could do as I pleased with him. I just preferred not to get any more involved than necessary with people who drank blood, or their entourage. Without a word, Cyrus pulled both my bags from my hands in one fell swoop and headed out the door with them. Not having to drag a suitcase and an overstuffed messenger bag down the stairs of doom was a blessing, but allowing him to take my stuff left me feeling like I owed him. I stayed behind and made sure I'd shut everything off. We'd be gone 3 days, which was absolutely long enough for my apartment to burn to ashes. Once satisfied I hadn't forgotten anything, I began the process of locking my damn door. As I fucked with the lock, I was reminded of the time Cyrus unlocked it with ease. I almost wished he had done this task and left me to heft the bags. After a few aggravating moments and a handful of choice words, I finally had the door locked tight. Hands free of cumbersome bags, I made my way down the steps. The tree limb was not only still hanging low over my staircase, but had doubled in size. Fledgling branches protruded from the thick limb, nearly putting an eye out. I ducked instinctively, but caught my hair on a few yellowing leaves. This happened at least 3 times a week. I'd recently become a pro at releasing myself from the clutches of nature. I shuffled through soggy piles of wet leaves, procrastinating the car ride with Cyrus. What if he wanted to talk about the bullet I'd put in him? What if I couldn't keep my shit together and I jumped him in the carpool lane? Okay, I had more self-control than that, but what if I actually had to interact with him? All but accusing someone of murder, then subsequently shooting that someone had the potential to create a hostile environment. Plus, he was really good-looking and it made me uncomfortable. Finally buckled in and leave-free, I allowed myself to smile at the ridiculousness that was my life. I was once again trapped in the car with Cyrus Atassa on the way to see about some vampires. At least I could relax. There were no dead girls. Don't press your luck.